Hello and welcome to the Bold Black Girls podcast. I'm Aries.
And I am Kim.
Hey Kim.
Hey Aries, how you doing?
Good.
So we're on
Trying
like
to
what week?
it,
I've lost
yeah.
track of the weeks.
Oh my God. It's been a crazy week for me this week. It was super busy. Like my work is picked up now. I'm out of that
Okay.
training phase. So it's real work and my calendar is like super full. But yeah, otherwise good. How about you? You had uh
So this
a
was
good
my
week.
first week. Yeah, I'm not disclosing who I'm working for, but this was my first week on the job. You know, you have to give it 30 days.
Yes.
30 days before I even update my LinkedIn because people are eager to see where is Kim. So first week was a success, excellent onboarding, excellent benefits. So I was just absolutely full.
Come on, somebody. I love that. I was excited. I told you I'd be like super juiced about your stuff. I'm like, I can't wait till she update her LinkedIn. I'm so crazy. I can't help it, but I'm glad you had a good week. We had some crazy stuff going on, obviously, this week with the
Yes.
this coronavirus. I tell you, it's bringing up. It's just bringing
It's
stuff to
a
the
it's
surface, ain't it?
revealing. It's what our friend Darius Daniels said. He said that this will reveal a lot. It's going to
Yeah,
reveal relationships. It's going to just reveal where we stand as a community, right?
as a community, as a country. We
Yes.
knew that there was just a lot of issues in America, but I think right now it's so highlighted. It's like I almost feel like we're back in time. The way things are happening, you got, the police shootings haven't stopped,
Which
and we,
that's really odd that you would think if you're sheltering in place, I mean, people would be, a little bit more caring during this time. It's so sensitive, right? Like, how are you out here just I don't know, but they did say gun sales were up. So
yeah, because I definitely am one of the one
holders.
of the ones. I was like, I gotta give me a new one. Um, yeah, because like my auntie used to say back in the 80s when I'd be like, why you got all these guns around the house? She used to have them hidden everywhere. She's like, when the revolution comes. That's what she used to always say. She was hecka militant. So, but nowadays I'm like, see, this is why you need one. So I did want to acknowledge on Friday, May 8th, was Ahmad Arbery's birthday, who was murdered while jogging down the street by two white males who one was an ex-police officer and his son, and then
Son.
there was a bystander, I think a neighbor, who was videoing it. And I did watch the video, and it's just it just saddens me every time. I always wonder if I'm going to watch it or not. Sometimes I do and sometimes I don't. I didn't
Right,
watch the
right.
other guy who got murdered by the police while running away. But I did see that one and it affected me. I'm not gonna lie. It really did. And so a lot of people took a walk on his birthday, walk or run or jog,
Right.
2.23 miles to acknowledge the day. February 23rd was the day that he died. And they just arrested these guys a couple days ago. So
Well, let's just say this. I saw the video too. I'm glad the neighbor recorded it because guess what? If we didn't have that on recording, would we have proof and evidence of it? I mean, if we didn't have
no.
that video, they would not have been brought to the surface.
Yeah, because they tried
So
to say that they thought he had robbed a house or something. It was, whatever it wasn't justified by what they did. That's not the punishment for that type of crime, even if he did.
correct.
So I would say that if you're non-Black and you are listening to this, familiarize yourself with these type of stories. They're easy to find because they happen too frequently, and this is
Yep.
stuff that we deal with when we go to work every day. I had a day where after all this kind of came to the surface, one of my coworkers said, hey, how are you today? And I just kind of want to be like, horrible, tired of Black people getting killed in the street. You know what I'm saying? Like, you can't really be honest, but
Yes.
it would be really great if your coworkers kind of knew that we deal with a whole different set of things, and especially now with this pandemic, it's highlighting a lot of the healthcare disparities, the economic disparities beyond the ones that everybody's going to already face by being in a
Pandemic.
recession,
Yes.
whatever. Um, it's bringing to the surface like they sent that $1,200 check or whatever to people, and that's it. That's supposed to help you, Meanwhile, raising hundreds of thousands of dollars for a salon owner who refused to close her store here in Dallas during the pandemic. And then
she has over $500,000 raised in GoFundMe. So she's good.
And then the Ted Cruz going to get his haircut over there, and they just making like she's just, a star and patriot. Meanwhile, social media trolling and shaming a Black lady who has her salon only because she accidentally didn't turn off an ad promoting her business. They were like, you can't be, these are all the consequences. She's like, I'm literally pregnant right now. I didn't know that the ad was still going on, but they got all on her Facebook page and was, saying all this crazy
exposing
stuff.
Her, yeah.
It just shows you, like, you can see, very clearly that we get a lot of the negative end of the stick when it comes to this stuff, and that people can't fix their eyes to see this as human. They can't see our skin as this, as human. We're way more alike than we are different, but because people just choose that Black is at the bottom.
Yep. And it kind of goes into the mental health that it has on us, right? The impacts to our mental. Yeah. So like, I will say this. I'm glad I'm actually working from home right now, because at this point I would not want to go into the office for several reasons of kind of managing my emotions. So here we are, May, it's mental health awareness. So we've had to kind of pivot, right, with mental health. You can see a mental health professional virtually as opposed to going in with corona. But again, who has access to that? People who are gainfully employed with EAP. So if you don't have a job, you may not have those resources. But today we have a special guest. Special guest, our special guest is Tristan Layfield from Layfield Resumes. I've had the pleasure of working with Tristan, so we want to welcome Tristan to
Come on in, Tristan. Hey.
Hey, y'all.
How are you?
Hey, how are you guys?
It's
great. It's going well.
So thank you for being here on the podcast as our guest speaker for the month of May. I think this is our second guest.
We've had, we've had 2 or 3.
Three. So you're our 4th guest. Yes. And so I reached out to Tristan.
I love the number 4.
Well, that's awesome. So I reached out to you, Tristan, because we've had an experience or a relationship. You updated my resume last year in 2019 as I was preparing for my pivot. And so you did an excellent job of not only updating my resume, but my LinkedIn. And I attribute that to being a part of the reason that I did secure the job. So thank you.
I am so glad. I am so glad, Kimberly. It was so nice working with you. So I'm so glad that everything worked out. And I'm really glad now to be able to come on the podcast too. So thank you.
Exactly.
Oh, you're welcome. And now I'm telling everybody, you need to get Tristan. Make sure Tristan update your resume and your LinkedIn. So if you get an overflow of an abundance of people, that's why.
Look, I appreciate it. Send them my way.
I want to highlight a couple things, kind of to segue into our conversation today. I was looking up some stats on where we stand with unemployment right now. And the last I looked, there were 33.5 million people who have applied for unemployment since we shut down. And they said that 20.5 million jobs were lost in April alone. And it had me like, that quickly, that many companies were not prepared to hold on to their employees, right? But what really got me was that for Black people and Hispanic people, we're always higher in those numbers, no matter what the numbers are. So the percentages were like, they said normally there's 3.5 to 4.4% was where we were. We were in a good place for the last, how many years. And then it dramatically changed in April. And they said the numbers, for instance, were right now, as of April, those numbers are 14.7% overall, but 16.7% for Black people and 18.9% for Hispanic people. So it's clearly, either the type of work that we do, whereas usually, going to be certain type of work, and then just the effect of all this on us, period, right? So I really want to have you talk to people right now as far as like, what's the first thing that people should do if they find themselves in a place where they've been laid off? Like, what should they focus on first?
And before he answers that, Trisha,
Yeah.
did you want to kind of highlight your business, like why
Yeah.
you started, what do you do, and how they can reach you?
Yeah, so I started my business in 2017. It was sort of birthed out of the need to, or the want more so, to help Black and Brown people really be able to convey their value, both in their documents, throughout interviews, pretty much throughout their entire job search, and even while they're in their jobs. Because one of the things I noticed, I was a regional manager for a biotech company for about 4.5 years, and I was hiring for my team and my director's team, my manager's team. And during that time, I really realized that the Black and Brown candidates that were coming to me were having a much harder time conveying the results and the value that they provided. And so when I noticed that, at the same time, my family and friends were asking me for help with their resumes and getting jobs. And I noticed, okay, they're actually landing the roles they wanted. So I started my business in 2017, thinking I was going to help a couple of people here or there. Next thing I knew, by the end of the year, I'd helped over 100 people. And, here I am 3.5 years later, and I'm at the 400 mark. And, I've been really grateful for the growth that I've had. And I always tell my clients, and I tell people that, like, my success hinges on their success. So if I can't be here for 3.5 years if y'all weren't successfully getting the things that you were supposed to be getting. So, I love working with my particular clientele. As far as where you can reach me, you can find me on all social media at Layfield Resume. So that's LayfieldResume, or you can connect with me on LinkedIn. It's Tristan Layfield. You'll see it. I'm sure you'll see my name in the podcast notes here.
So he's the expert, guys. He just told you his numbers. He's pulling numbers up in here. Okay. So
and I'm a live testimony, right?
Exactly.
Of that.
Look, I tell people I have no problem spewing out the numbers. I got an 83% placement rate in 6 months. Okay, let's talk about it. But let's back to the question that you asked. Like, when people lose their jobs, I always tell them the first thing you want to do is to deal with your emotions. I think everybody, the first thing is they immediately want to jump. They want to apply for unemployment. They want to get into action mode, which is fine. We want action, but you got to first contend with the emotions that you're feeling. Because if you don't, that's going to be something that's going to come back and bite you down the line. Right. And then obviously the second thing you want to start doing is working on your financials. That includes, filing for unemployment. Then that also includes looking at your own financials. What are you spending money on, right? What subscription services can you go ahead and let go of for this time being, or you can put a pause on, right? And then really after that, you really want to start to take a look at the market, because you've obviously lost your job, especially in this situation. You've lost your job for a reason, and usually the jobs that are very similar in your industry are in the same position as you, right? So you need to do a little bit of market research to understand, okay, who's hiring, what type of roles are they hiring for, and that better gives you an idea of how to figure out what experiences and skills you have that are transferable to the roles that are out there. And then you can actually start working on your resume and your LinkedIn, because those things need to be tailored to the roles that are actually on the market at this point.
Yeah, that makes me think about it. Like I said, we always talk about staying ready so you ain't got to get ready. Like you might want to start doing that even if you have a job right now, like making sure you're staying relevant, because if you see your company kind of going down a path, don't be like the people, I don't know if y'all read, that book, Who Moved My Cheese, where the cheese is starting to smell a little foul. You got to move on. It's time to start looking somewhere else. Like if your industry is becoming obsolete or something like that, start preparing now to see what do I need to start learning ahead of time before getting that notice, right?
100%. You want to start ahead of time for sure. And like what I tell people is, if you have a job now, I would say that's great, but just don't be too comfortable, right? We don't know what's going to happen with all of this. I just recently saw a report out of South Korea, and they have a spike in 40 cases from some one person who went to a nightclub that they've reopened, right?
Wow.
So we don't know what's going to happen with this. So don't get too comfortable with that. But then also, you really want to make sure that you are what was I gonna say? I done lost my train of thought, child. No, you don't want to get too comfortable, but you also really want to look at what happened, right? People lost their jobs, and you just spewed off those facts. Who are usually hit by these things, right? It's us.
Yep.
So, if we know that we're usually the first people that are impacted, that means we need to stay on our toes and stay ready at all times.
Stay ready and stay relevant. And I can attest to that. So when I reached out to you, Tristan, I wasn't really sure that I was ready to leave a company that I was with for 19 years. But I was like, let me get in preparation mode, right, for my pivot, because I knew I was planning to pivot. I just didn't know that I was ready and that I needed to just gain some skill sets. And like you said, understand those transferable skills and where they can be utilized in other areas. And I think a lot of people don't take the time to do that.
Yeah, that's always the hardest part when I work with my clients. They don't know how their skills are going to get them to the next level, when I'm like, dude, all of those relate. What are you talking about? Let me show you how, right? But it's really hard to see when we've been in our jobs, especially like you, Kim. You've been at your company for a really long time, right? And we get so into doing the job that we forget what is relevant or what's important or the achievements that we make and all those things. So we don't necessarily know immediately how to convey that. So, it is one of the hardest parts, is figuring out what's transferable and what relates.
And job titles have changed, like
tremendously.
You can't go back to like what you thought you wanted to be or what role you wanted, because they literally transform after months. Like customer success manager was not a title, a couple years ago.
Or social media manager.
Yeah. So it's like so many things where you got to stay on it just to know what is going on, and where you can use those same skills. It might be the exact same job, but it has a different title now, you know?
Yep. We see that in HR. They'd be like director of people.
Yes.
Chief people officer, right?
Exactly.
And I like to highlight two things. One is the best time to look for a job is when you have a job, right? So like you said, don't get comfortable. And I think a lot of us, we do get comfortable. And the second thing is, I've had people walk up to me like, hey, can you help me with the job? I'm like, well, what do you want to do? They don't know. And I think you need to know what you want to do and how you want to pivot, because no one else can help you unless you help yourself.
Yep. And that's the key. That's one of the biggest keys to job searching at this point in time, is getting very clear on where you want to go. Because what we're doing is we're fighting against a couple of different factors. We're fighting against what they call the applicant tracking software, right? The ATS, which is a computer system that scans your resume before it's ever even seen by a human, right? So we're fighting against that. We need to make sure we have keywords to get past that. And then once it gets in front of a human, a recruiter or hiring manager, studies show that across industries, they scan it for about 6 seconds to determine if they're going to fully read it or throw it in the no pile, right? So you're fighting against multiple factors here. And so if you aren't really clear on what you want to do, you can't get really clear on what's relevant to that role. You start casting a wide net, and that actually works against you, and it works against your favor.
6 seconds. Okay, so let's talk about these resumes then, because I want to. I'm like, so you really have to. So people who are like going online, they're just applying everywhere and being like, oh man, why am I not getting no callbacks and stuff like that? Like, first, we could address the resume part of that piece. What has changed like with resumes over the years? You just mentioned the keyword stuff. Like, how do you incorporate that into a resume effectively?
Yeah. So most of the keywords that you're going to want to incorporate can be found in the job description, right? So they're usually the things that show up the most often. And some of the ways that you can find that is there are these tools called word cloud generators. I don't know if anybody's ever used them before, but essentially you can Google. There's tons of word cloud generators out there. You can take a a job description, and you can copy and paste it into the word cloud generator. And then you hit the button, and it's going to bring up an image of a ton of words. And the bigger the word is, the more often it shows up inside of the job description. So more than likely,
Kim.
that's
Kim was the words, when it's a bunch of words all over the place with this like all the words come in and then whatever's been repeated a whole bunch of times, it pops up?
Yes,
Oh,
I have.
Yeah, yep. So that's an easy, cheap, free way to do that, right? Another way is a website called Jobscan.co. I think that's the website. Just Google Jobscan, y'all.
Okay.
But it's a great website where essentially you're able to copy and paste your resume and the job description in, and it does an analysis, and it will show you the keywords that may be missing from the document. Now, I tell people with that, you want to take it with a grain of salt. Focus mainly on the keywords. Some of the other areas are a little iffy, but the keywords is a great place to really focus with that tool.
I didn't even think about that.
Right. And you make a good point, because I know I had someone say, hey, I've been applying for this job. They denied me. I said, well, did you alter the resume to the job posting? They said, no. I'm like, well, that's why. And so I think
customize it.
And I personally probably had about 5 different versions of my resume, depending on what job I was applying for.
Yep.
What would you suggest?
And it's like,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, go. Oh, no, by all means.
I was going to say, what would you suggest as far as ways to get your resume seen by people? What's the best methods, or should we be on these websites like Glassdoor or LinkedIn and all that kind of stuff? Like how should people be positioning the resume piece?
Yeah, so I think we are in a space where we have gotten all this technology, but our job search strategies have not really changed from what our parents and grandparents have done. We're still in a mail and wait type of mindset, right? When you're just talking about all those people applying to these jobs and why am I not getting callbacks? We're on what I call a defensive job search instead of an offensive job search, right? So what people need to do is realize that the job boards, only about 20% of jobs are actually filled through online job postings. The other 80% are typically filled through networking and referrals. So if your job search strategy,
we always tell
if your job search strategy is, go ahead.
I was gonna say we always tell our audience about networking, so I just want to throw that in there. So
look. It's the key. I'm telling you, I'm coming out with a group coaching program, and that's a large portion of it, because when you just are applying online, like I told you, you're fighting against all those other factors. But when you network and you really develop relationships with people who can potentially refer you inside of companies or organizations, you're 15 times more likely to land the role. And 80% of recruiters and hiring managers agree that referrals are the best way to find a qualified candidate. So, if you are strictly just applying online, I would suggest you go talk to a career coach. It ain't got to be me, but it got to be somebody, because you need a real job search strategy in place.
And let me say, I am the product of networking and a referral, and it worked.
Me too.
Look,
mine too. I did not apply until the person referred me already. They sent me the referral link. I applied through that, and then they also, put the word in, and that I already was going through the process at that point. So.
Yep. And can I say this? So about this referral, if I ask someone to refer me and I did ask this person to refer me, I knew when I asked them for this referral that I could do the job. I don't want to ask anybody for a referral knowing that I am not competent enough, or I don't have the skill set to do the job. Because if you get in there, you get the job and you can't fulfill it, you make me look bad, and then we have a problem.
Yep. Absolutely. You need to be able to do the job. And you can't just go off and ask somebody for a referral, right? You find this man that work at, whatever company, and be like, hey, I'm Tristan. Would you like to connect with me and refer me to your company? That's just not going to work, boo. Okay.
You have to cultivate those relationships.
Yep. You truly do. And there's a key to that too. And I think people go into building those relationships with the mindset of having to sell yourself immediately. And I don't think that's how you want to approach that. I've never seen that actually work. You want to really appeal to people's altruistic side, right? The side that wants to help people. You want to ask them for a favor, right? You don't want to do this exchange of services, because that's really what you put them in the mindset of. When you start selling, they start wondering, what's my return on investment? And unfortunately, you're not in a position to really give them much return on their investment at that point, right?
Correct.
So you got to be very mindful of how you reach out and how you cultivate those relationships to end up landing that referral.
That's something that I don't know where Kim went. That's something that we talk about all the time as far as cultivating relationships in times when you don't need anything from them, because that will build your credibility with someone that, okay, this person has just been a person that adds value. In different ways, how we can do that, and even if you're just like, especially with like LinkedIn, it like reminds you of things you can reach out to people about, like, oh, congratulations on the new job or the new position, or happy birthday, or comment on their posts, things like that. And I think that makes, a big difference after you've done that over time. When it comes time for you to actually need something, then you can reach out and say, hey, this is what's going on. It might make them feel a lot more comfortable helping you if they built that relationship with you over some time.
Yep, exactly. You got to start cultivating those relationships before you need them. When you
Exactly.
just do it when when you need it, people can tell that you are literally using them. So you need to be very mindful of that. While you have jobs, start developing those relationships, start working them, start seeing where you provide value to them, because people go into networking thinking all about me. How can you help me? What can you do for me? Right? And that's not the right mindset. You got to go in like, how can I help you? So you in turn will want to help me. Right.
Exactly.
It's a two-way street. You don't just get something out of a networking relationship. You also need to give.
Exactly. Yeah, we could talk about networking for days over here, but now networking, it's a lot different though, right? We're in this situation. We can't go to networking events. We can't do that. So kind of the stuff that I think I was talking about, but are there other ways that you are recommending to people now? Like, so if I get laid off and I'm coming to you now, like, okay, here's where I'm at. What kind of questions are you asking people to like position them properly, I guess?
Like position them to network, or position them to land the
To
role.
land the role, like just in
To land the
general. I'm
role.
coming to you first day, like, hey, I got laid off yesterday.
Yep.
And let's just say, okay, I have a baseline resume, but I need some help. My LinkedIn is basic. I need some help. It's just a picture of me listing jobs, and that's it. Like, what do you take them through? Like, what's the process you take people through?
Yeah. So it really depends on if you're clear on what job you want or not, right? So if you're not, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to get super crystal clear on what type of role you want, right? And that may not just be one, you may have two, that's fine. But understand, the more that you list, the more resumes and the more effort that is going to need to be put into this, right? So we get super crystal clear first, because you can't do anything else without that. Then from there, we start to develop relationships, right? Just so start figuring out what type of companies do I want to work at, right? And then you want to go on to LinkedIn and start building a list of people to potentially reach out to, right? So you start building that list, and then I come back and we start talking about your value, right? What value have you brought to the workplace, to your previous employers, and what do you think you can bring to your future employer, right? And that value is going to be the thing. It's the underlying thread of everything in your career. So I think people think that, oh, I've done this and I've done that and I've done this, that there's no underlying thread between all of them, but there is. There is something that you've done really well, or something that's drawn you to those roles, that is the underlying thread of where you provide value. Right. And once you get really clear on that, then you can write a results-driven, value-driven resume. Right. And that value then guides how you market yourself on LinkedIn, right? How you change that header image, what type of headline you have, who you're reaching out to, what type of posts you might have. And those things are going to drive recruiters to your page, right? When you have a good headline, a good picture, you're commenting, you're posting, that's going to drive more people to your page. And then we start really digging into those relationships, right? So reaching out to the people at these companies, asking for informational interviews to learn about them and their career and working at their company and some of the trends they're seeing in their industry, right? Learning a lot about them, because people love to talk about themselves. So they're more likely to actually go on an informational interview if you frame it from a place of, I'd love to hear more about you and your experience. And then there's, I teach, I can't give away all my little secrets, but I got I got a little framework for my informational interviews, the types of questions that you should ask. And those questions are going to do a couple of things. They're going to help you really figure out what's going on in the industry, because every informational interview is not going to result in you getting a referral, right? But every informational interview results in you getting more market research to figure out how to tailor that resume, how to tailor that LinkedIn, what type of stuff you should be posting on LinkedIn, right? It gives you insight, the things you should be talking about in the interview. So it makes you a wiser job seeker overall. And the more you develop those relationships and the more you continue working them, the better the odds that you're going to land that referral, right? And so there's a little process to doing that too, but that's sort of the process that we walk through. We really identify the value, identify where they want to go, identify the value that they bring, make sure that's conveyed properly in both their document and the thing that markets them to the entire professional world, and then work on utilizing those to network. And the reason we want to have those in place is because you start networking on somebody like, send me your resume, and you like, yeah, I still need to get to that one, right? So that's sort of how the flow goes, and that's sort of what I walk them through. And the process, it's funny because that's what I was doing pre-COVID, but the process hasn't changed post-COVID, right? The way that we network, when I say network, I'm not talking about those events that everybody go to that's awkward and not necessarily facilitated well, and you don't really meet nobody, and you go home and you like, oh, why did I do that, right?
Like a bunch of business cards.
Yeah, that you never actually follow up on, right? Like, we're not going that route. I'm talking about targeted, intentional networking with individuals, right? People who are 1 to 2 levels above where you want to go. And that means finding them on LinkedIn and utilizing an entire virtual thing. I was doing that before. We were having phone calls or Google Hangouts or Zooms or Skype. So whatever was their preference, right? 15 minutes of your time. Because the thing about it is sometimes the people that you're going to want to talk to aren't even going to be in the same state as you. That's just simply the fact, right? So networking has looked a lot different now, but it doesn't necessarily change the game, right? You go to the webinar and you go connect with those people on LinkedIn afterwards. So, because those are the people that are maybe in the same position or may have the jobs or whatever the case may be, right? So it's networking, but it's in a much different fashion.
I think it's like what you described to me is kind of like a combination of that and building your brand, right? Like you're creating an image and it should go along with what you want to do and what you want people to know you for, so that when they say, oh, I want someone who can do these things. Oh, let me go to Kim's page. You know, she's one who knows this. Like, this is the brand that you've created. You tell people what you want them to say about you. Who was that? Carla Harris?
Yes.
Carla Harris? Like, you teach people what to call you. You teach them what to call you. You tell them what you want them to call you. And I do think that's important. And what I'm doing even now with these webinars for the networking piece is going in the chats. You're seeing my name in the chat. You know, people are like, oh yeah,
exactly.
Putting tips in when we're in a webinar, like, oh yeah, and I use this for that. And they're like, oh, thanks, Aries. And the next thing I know, my LinkedIn got people adding me.
It's popping.
You know?
It's popping at that point, right? It's so many ways to do that.
Yeah.
I used to tell my boss, I said, it goes down in my LinkedIn DM. Just know that.
Hello. And like, Aries, you are so right. Building that professional brand, that's what's going to get you where you want to go, right? That's going to keep the job postings in your LinkedIn DMs, even when you already have a job that you're very comfortable with and like, right? Though people love to come and court you at that point in time, which means that if anything does go south, you got those things waiting in your DM and you ain't worried about that. Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Sure, Jan. Fine. But I'm going to go over here. Right. So it's key.
I think people need to take that energy that they're using on Facebook and Instagram. If you don't have no job, you better take all that social media and transfer that to LinkedIn until you get what you need. You don't need to be in no DMs on Instagram. Get in them DMs on LinkedIn.
No versus battles for y'all. Okay, you need to
Right.
go over to LinkedIn.
Right. So tell me this, Tristan. You have provide resume and LinkedIn services. Do you provide a service on helping people with their professional brand? Because I feel like sometimes African Americans, we struggle in that arena, right? How to present our professional brand, and then you get the resume done, you have the LinkedIn. It's time to get to the interview. How do you sell that professional brand? Is there a service that you offer for that?
Yeah, so I offer a couple of different things. So I do offer currently hourly individual coaching.
Okay.
So something that's really tailored to your particular situation. And so we're able to really talk about what you need, right? It's completely tailored to the needs at the point in time. And so that could be, how do I actually build a good LinkedIn profile? And then what do I post on it, right? How often should I post on it? How do I reach out to people? What type of messages should I be sending, right? So we could go through a whole slew of things inside of there because we're able to customize that. Now, but what I have done is over my time of working with these nearly 400 people, I've went back and I sort of reviewed, what have I done with those people? What steps have I taken? What has worked with them, right? And each step of the job search phase. And what I've done is I've taken all that knowledge and I've built a group coaching program that basically will teach people the 4 steps that we talked about earlier. Basically, I'm teaching you my secret sauce of basically running my business, if I'm being quite frank. But I teach people how to, number one, identify their value. If you don't understand your value, if you do not believe in your own value, you cannot convey that to anyone else. Point blank, period. Right? All that imposter syndrome stuff, it got to go. We got to know what we are good at, and we got to stand firmly in that. Okay.
I'm over here with my hand up like I'm in church.
look, y'all done got my Deacon Layfield hat on now, okay?
Come on. Look, we be preaching out here all the time, so you'll be right in line. I'm evangelist. I'm evangelist over here.
Look, so then once we have that value in this group coaching program, I then teach you how to take that and build the results-driven resume that's going to help you be seen, right? That means from how you should structure your bullet points to what type of formats you should use to, all how to actually identify and incorporate those keywords. I teach you all of those particular methods. Then we build that LinkedIn, which is less about all the stuff we talked about on the resume and more about how you market yourself. So that's what we talk about on that. How do you market that value that we've already identified? And so we talk about, a content strategy. We talk about a strategy to reach out to people. We talk about also an engagement strategy, which means not just building your own content, but engaging with other people's content, because that's how you're going to be seen on the platform. And then we wrap that up with a nice hefty chunk of the program focusing on networking. I basically have this process that I help people walk through on, number one, identifying about a list of 40 companies to potentially work for. Because one of the things I'm a firm believer of, we get too caught up in the big box companies, right? We're always caught up in the Amazons, the Facebooks, the this, that, and the other. When we think about it, in 2018, there were 16 million employers, and between them, they had 165 million job openings. 2/3 of those were at companies with 100 employees or less, right? So if you aren't considering small businesses in your job search, you are literally ruling out 2/3 of the job openings that are out there.
Especially in the tech world, because that's a lot of the startups are tech companies, and you can get you can move up quicker in those small companies as far as your titles and all that kind of thing. So where you can, if you want to go to a big place, now you can leverage your experience and your title to another place if you want to.
Yeah.
I think that's super important to do.
You gain so much more exposure at those places. You gain so much more exposure, right?
Experience.
You get to put on multiple hats. Yeah, 100%. And so, I teach them this process of identifying about a list of 40 employers, how to really then on like 3 very simple data points, really, I guess, filter them and figure out, okay, what are the top 5 that I'm going to be focusing on? And how do I then identify people at those companies and reach out to them, right? And so what that's going to look like is there's an intentional outreach and follow-up process, right? You can't just reach out to somebody one time and think that that's going to always do it, right? I mean into the you how to find the email addresses of them at their companies, right? Like we go beyond just the LinkedIn DMs. We're going real in depth here. And then that's going to be the thing that leads you to actually getting those referrals. So, I built this comprehensive program. It's about a 3-month program, but what it does is it teaches you a repeatable job search process that you can put in place from here to next time they decide they want to change all this mess. But we gonna evolve it too.
Yes.
So.
Wow. Oh my God. Now that y'all better call him after this. If he don't tell us that he had a whole bunch of people hitting him up after this, y'all come on now. Like we got to be ready. Even if you have a job that you think is just fine, you should still go through this process just to prepare yourself in case. Just in case. This is not those companies where I know like my parents, I get laid off. I leave jobs. And my parents be so nervous because they're used to the old school method of like, you get to one company, you stay there 35 years. I'm like, they're not staying with me. I want to stay. I wanted to stay.
They're not loyal.
And they're not loyal. Exactly. So you got to be ready to move whenever it just, when it happens. So be ready. And he better tell us that he getting people hitting him up. I'm going to be like,
that's the importance of preparing for the pivot.
Yeah,
exactly.
100%. You got to prepare. And back to your point of your parents with the staying at the same company. Let's be real. I'm a stats guy. If y'all haven't noticed, I love numbers, and all of my process are based off of data, right? Like everything I do is based off of data. so statistically, unfortunately for millennials and the generations after us, the longer we stay at a company past 2 years, the more money we end up losing. That's just simply facts.
And I'm another one, right? So I can testify to that. Being there 19 years did not serve my salary well. But when I left, it was like, I should have left a long time ago. I'm kicking my butt. And so now I'm already telling my daughter, don't you go somewhere and you stay long. Know your value and leave. Go where you're compensated and celebrated.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. You talk about 2 to 3% raises every year inside of a company when it's a 10 to 15% jump when you get a new job most of the time, right? Or more, depending on how good you are at negotiating. So let's talk about that too, right? So, at this point, it's all about figuring out what's best for you and your career. And sometimes that is, okay, I've been here for 2 years. Let me start doing this search. And maybe it's you find some good offers and you can take them back to your company and they'll match those things. Great. If that's where you want to stay, do that. But, you got to make sure that you're doing what's best for you. And I think, we get too caught up in some of the outdated advice that we get from our well-intentioned parents and grandparents, right? They are just trying to help us out. That's all they're trying to do.
It's a whole new world.
It's a whole new world.
Right.
It's our job to influence them now. We're impacting them now. Like my mom is a believer now that I just had to ignore them and do it the right way. She's like, okay, no, now I'm, like she's on board. I think my dad was even worse. He's like, you just like, please just stay one place. They want you to have that security, like they are all about making sure you secure your future. So I think they have the well intentions, but this ain't what we in a whole different type of situation now.
Job searching changed while we were in it. So how how is the advice from when they were in it even going to be relevant, right? So yeah, it's well intentioned, but it's definitely not the thing that's going to get you where you want to go.
Right. And not only
go ahead.
the job interviewing, like so after 19 years, this was my first time interviewing for a job. I interviewed 5 times for one role with the same company. And at the end, it was a presentation. I've never experienced that. So I had to get ready. Luckily, I had my good friend Aries, who had already gone through the process. So I could lean and glean from her so I could prepare for it. But I don't think that a lot of people are prepared for that.
I had 4 interviews. The last one was a presentation. My role is sales role. So I had to do a 30, 60, 90-day plan, which I kind of incorporated an intro to myself in the beginning, kind of like for the people who I had not interviewed who were going to be a part of the panel discussion, because it was 3 people, but I hadn't talked to some of them before. So I'm like, let me make sure I reiterate my awesomeness before I start the 30, 60, 60, 90.
Yeah.
So then I shared that with Kim, and then hers was more of a personal intro, like kind of herself. So she was able to flip that, tweak it, customize it to herself. But we weren't doing that before. That wasn't like a criteria. So you got to know how to present, create PowerPoints,
speak.
Yeah. It's crazy. So like even for my last job, because I quit my job at the end of 2019, but when I interviewed for it, I had a whole afternoon of interviews, right? Like I had to take a whole half day to interview with people, and I had 4 interviews during that time, right?
Wow.
And there was like 5-minute breaks in between them. You talking to these 4 different people. That's intense and sort of stressful at points.
It's
so you got to be prepared, right? And if you don't know how to build a story bank of answers when it comes to interviews, you end up sounding like a broken record in each one of them. And then that plays against you as well, because you can't diversify your answers. And so you got to get really clear on some of the things you've done. That's reflecting on your experiences and figuring out, there's a couple different frameworks, but what I like to tell people is, like, when we're doing behavioral interview questions, there's a methodology called PARC, and it stands for problem, action, results, and knowledge, right? So when you're telling them an answer to those behavioral questions, like tell me about a time when, or can you provide an example of, you want to think, what was the problem? What action did I take to solve it? What were the results from that? And what knowledge did I gain? And that knowledge is key. People can usually answer the first 3, but people don't always answer the last one, the knowledge. And that shows that you're reflective and that you figure out how to not necessarily let that issue or problem happen again, right? So you got to be very intentional about how you're answering those questions. You got to build a story bank to be able to do that.
This is why y'all got to call him, because we could be doing this for days. We not about to, because Jill Scott and Erykah Badu is about to do their verses in a minute. And I told them, we gonna be done with this before that.
Look, my incense and my aromatherapy is ready. Okay.
Yes. So what I want to do as we kind of come to a close here, because I do, like I said, this could be a group coding session right now. But we just kind of want to bring some of these things to our audience's attention to know, because we do get people reaching out to us saying, like, what did you do? And what's your secret to success, or whatever it is. Right. And it's like, doing the work first is the secret. The secret is making yourself aware of, like, what you need to know. Either for, hey, you know what, I don't like my job, I want a new job, and I need to go learn about that job. Who does it? Do I really like it? Like all of that stuff. Educate yourself with, and go to a coach like Tristan, so that you can figure all this new stuff out. It is new stuff every year. Something changes, that you might have to tweak your resume this way or that way. Like, I try to keep my resume updated all the time. Even though I'm gonna call you too, because I don't really like my resume that much. I don't want to look at it no more. It's like looking at it, I just want it to be different. Yeah. So, but no, these are things that, like, it's not a secret. It is work. It is going to take intentionality,
Yes.
Yeah. We're so used to leaving our careers to chance instead of being intentional with them. Right?
I agree.
And most of us, and when I say us, the Black community, we don't know. We weren't introduced to career coaches. What are those? Right? Like, I didn't even know those were.
We ain't got no money for that. I ain't got no job. What I got money for that for?
Well, you do have money for it. I think that you have to know that I'm going to make this investment in me, and if I take this $500 or whatever, and I invest in me and I gain a 40% increase in my raise, I mean, it's worth it. So maybe not go get those Jordans or that purse and kind of pivot that investment into yourself where you can then increase your salary. So I think it's our mindset too. And I had to come to that realization. I was like, you know what? I'm going to make this investment, and this is how much I'm putting aside to budget for 2019 or 2020 for Kim, professionally and personally.
Yep. It's not an expense. It's an investment. That's simply what it is, right? Like, why wouldn't you want to invest in learning a job search strategy that you can do repeatedly, right? That means you don't have to come back to me as a career coach. I taught you everything you need to know, right? So if I'm charging you a decent price, but you're going to be able to get these jobs, I think that's a fair trade-off.
Tristan taught me.
Right.
I'm biased though. I'm biased.
Yes. Okay. So again, really quickly, and we'll do a call to action after this, but we want to run down your LinkedIn, your Instagram. Where can people find you?
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and in Twitter at Layfield Resume. So LayfieldResume. And you can connect with me, Tristan Layfield, on LinkedIn.
Connect with him.
So what would we say, Kim, are our call to actions for today for the audience?
So I would say the call to action is one, prepare, right? So reach out to Tristan. You might need to update your resume, update your LinkedIn, prepare, identify those roles that you are looking for that you want to pursue. If you have a job, still continue to do that, because the best time to look for a job is when you have one. And also get with friends to do a mock interview so that you can become comfortable in those interviews, because I think a lot of times that's where we stumble are in the interviews. Number 2, learn a new skill set, right? So like you said earlier, you identified that you were laid off, or maybe in that industry, we might need to pivot and find a different industry where we can transfer those skills and gain new skills. And then 3, the networking part. I definitely think that that's one way, an additional call to action. And I know we're limited, but you still can do virtual networking. And if you need help, reach out to Tristan, because he can provide you some coaching. So at the end of the day, I would say collectively invest in yourself is your call to action.
Yes, those are perfect call to actions. I also want to call to action for you to rate and review this episode. And head over to boldblackgirls.com, get your Bold Black Girls t-shirt. We had a sale last week for Mother's Day, and it was
thank you all.
Everybody was ordering shirts. So y'all don't forget about us. Go ahead and get your Bold Black Girl t-shirt for the Bold Black Girl in your life. And we will holler at y'all next week.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks, Tristan.
Thank you.